In today's video, we're checking out the Astri Hori 50mm f1.4 prime lens. This is super fast and it has some unique characteristics, including this. Crazy stuff. Let's get into it. Welcome back, folks. This is Shane. In today's video, we're checking out what might be the most unique lens I've had my hands on. This is a prime lens that you can also tilt and move in different positions and lock it in. I'll give you a rundown of the physical build of this, but this can open up a lot of creative opportunities that you might not find on regular lenses, and I'll showcase what the tilt aspect of it does. I'll timestamp everything in the description below. A massive thank you to Astri Hori for sending this out for the review. I really appreciate it. If you want to check it out, I'll link it down below. Included in the box, we get the lens, a lens cap, and a cap for the rear element. The rear element of this lens is metal as well, so it's not plastic or anything like that. Astri Hori have done a great job at producing a high build quality lens. Notice though, there's no terminals or anything, so no autofocus, no nothing. You'll be doing all of that manually thanks to these rings here. This is a nifty 50, so it's a 50mm focal length. We get a filter thread size of 46mm, so if you want to run an ND filter, you can screw that into the front of the lens. We get an aperture between f1.4 and f16, so this will help you isolate your subject and blur out the background. This creates an extreme amount of background blur, so if that's what you're looking for, this will do the job. This lens is 100% completely manual, which means you need to set the focus and the aperture manually as well. We get an aperture ring on the top. The focus ring is at the bottom with a minimum focusing distance of 0.5 meters. You can loosen this third ring across the bottom here by turning it counterclockwise, and that will make the tilt mechanism far easier to move. Now, say for example, you want it in this position, you can then tighten it up again and it will stay there. This is really cool. It's something very different. Even with it with some tension on, you can still move it around. So I like to leave it where it's still easy enough to push around but won't ever come loose. The optical structure of this lens is 7 elements in 6 groups, and we get MC multi-layer coating, which helps prevent lens flaring. The weight of the Astri Hori lens is lighter than the prime lens from Panasonic. This S-Series 50mm f1.8 comes in at 363 grams, whereas the Astri Hori, even though it's built with metal, comes in at 339 grams. So it's physically smaller than your regular prime lens, while also being lighter. While the aperture and focus rings feel great on the Astri Hori lens, I really prefer the big grip of the S-Series just in the fingers. I like to know exactly where the focus ring is, whereas on this it's far smaller, but in terms of its fluidity, it really feels good. When it comes to the feel of the manual focus ring and pulling focus, it feels really nice in the hand, and I was easily able to replicate my focus pulls time and time again. Being that there's hard stops on either side makes this really easy. This lens does have some focus breathing, and if you're used to the S-Series primes, you'll notice a big difference between the two. Is it the worst when it comes to focus breathing? Absolutely not, but it's just something I want to point out. One of the great things about the Astri Hori lens is if you don't need f1.4, or if you want to change your aperture for video mode, you can do it just simply by using this declicked aperture ring. It feels really great under the fingers, and it allows you to change your settings on the fly. Background blur, bokeh balls, all that kind of stuff are cool, but what I love about this is the background separation, how shallow the depth of field can be. If you're a big fan of that, this lens is a no-brainer. Let's take a look at the tilt function, because this is something that completely shocked me once I got my hands on it. What I would consider this to be great for is for folks who want to get really dreamy looking footage. I think it works great in combination with opening up the aperture to f1.4. This is where it really shines. You can get almost different kinds of focus planes, which means it doesn't just give you a focus line kind of across the field. It can be warped up diagonally, almost straight in some situations, depending on where you have the angle. This will drastically change your artistic creativity. It will just give you a very different look to any lens that you've had prior. If you've just been using your regular prime lenses, they won't be anything like this. I guess the takeaway here is while this is a tilt lens, you don't have to use it as a tilt lens. It's a super fast prime, which will make it very appealing to a lot of people shooting L mount if you're happy to use those manual features. Paired with the Panasonic S5, I was able to get really clean images in low light. All the footage that you're looking at was shot in sundown. It did a really great job. I've also tested this with no lighting indoors and it works well also. So f1.4 opens up and gives you a lot of extra light gathering ability. One of the most interesting things about this lens was how it handled the Sunstar effect. Now, as the sun was coming down, I stopped it down to f16 and I got a really beautiful look. I haven't seen this look with any of my other primes. I didn't do a direct comparison at that exact moment with my 50mm f1.8, but I thought it handled this extremely well with minimal flaring. So with Sunstars, it does a great job and it doesn't have a lot of lens flaring either. The coating on here works really well. You will see it from time to time like on most lenses, but I didn't think it was a problem. When it comes to sharpness, you'll be pleasantly surprised by this f1.4 lens. Usually you sort of have to stop most of them down to about f2.8 or at least 1.8 before they start to get a little sharper. But this did a really great job. I was quite satisfied with the photos and test video that I've shot with this, so I have no complaints when it comes to sharpness. Let's talk about vignetting. If you have this lens pointing forwards, you shouldn't have too much of an issue when it comes to vignetting for both photos and video. But where you will notice a massive change is if you have it either hard left, hard right, up or down. You'll definitely see some black circles on the corner of the frame, and this is evident in both photo and video mode. I don't think this is a deal breaker. I see it as adding character to a lens that's already quite a bit different. I'll leave an example of this on screen in video mode so you can see how extreme the vignetting can be. Let's talk about the pros and cons when it comes to the ASTRI Hori 50mm f1.4 prime. So video quality, picture quality, all that kind of stuff is awesome. I have no complaints there whatsoever. I love its dreamy-like effect at open at f1.4, or if you use the tilt, you can also create some very different looks. So overall, it gets the big thumbs up there. My only small critique about this is if you do tilt it, bringing it back to straight can sometimes be a little bit of a challenging experience. But if you have any slight tilt on this lens, when you think you're in the regular mode, it can add some extra distortion, so just be wary of that. What I found works really well is if I do it this way with the camera body attached to it, I can sort of position this a little bit easier back to flat that way. So that's just my experience with the lens. You can loosen it and do it as well, but there's no locking point at dead center, which would have been nice. As you can see from the sample footage, this lens really shines when it comes to creating that really shallow depth of field, whilst also working great in a low lit environment. And if that's what you're looking for, and you're looking for a lens that's a little bit different, and you're comfortable using everything manually, then this makes a lot of sense. If you're just getting started with photography or videography, this lens is a really niche product. So I would recommend this for someone who's comfortable already using manual mode on the camera. Being that we get that smooth aperture ring, it makes it great for video, but you've got to understand what it's doing and how it's doing it. So f1.4 is extremely shallow depth of field. If you're going to be doing any type of video work, I would say stop it down to about 2.8, especially if you're on a gimbal. But at f1.4 in low lit conditions, or if you want to create a really dreamy or pop from the background look, then this lens delivers. Thanks for watching, folks. My name's Shane. If you want to check this out, I'll link it down below. A massive thank you to ASTRI Hori for sending this out. I'll catch you on the next video. See ya.